Hey everybody, Tall Family Films here. Today we're going to be doing rear brakes on a 2007 Nissan Titan. The same thing would apply for anything from 2004 to 2015. Also applies to the Infiniti QX56, QX80, and the Nissan Armada. So let's get started. First thing you're going to want to do is go and loosen the reservoir cap for the brake fluid. We're going to have a little bit of back pressure going on here, so we don't want that to be tightly secured. Next, for safety reasons, we need to make sure the truck's not going to move on us, so let's chock the wheels. We need to go back and jack the truck up. So there's a certain spot underneath the truck where you're trying to aim. You could jack it up from the axle, but I'm going to show you exactly where we're trying to position this floor jack in order to jack the truck up. So right here is a special plate that's been welded on to the frame exactly for the floor jack to meet up with. So we put the saddle of the jack right on it and begin to jack the truck up. When we have the wheel actually off the ground, we want to take a jack stand and put it under the rear axle. So raise it up, get it to meet with the axle or as close as you can, and then you need to let the truck back down onto the jack stand. Once it's supported by the jack stand, put a little bit of pressure back onto the floor jack so that both the floor jack and the jack stand are supporting the truck. And then you want to go push the truck. You want to push it from all angles. Make sure that it is stable before you go pulling the wheel off. This is critical. You don't want to skip this. All right, big tip here. If you're going to post something on YouTube, don't let your plumber's butt show out the back of your pants. It's very important. Next, I have two different impact wrenches here to take the lug nuts off of the truck. And the first one is this Ryobi. So the Ryobi is a great tool, but that's how much it took to remove this one nut. That's the second lug nut. Now, this isn't really a commercial for Milwaukee tools, but I'm going to switch over to the Milwaukee Impact. I love Milwaukee tools. Ryobi is great. Sometimes there's things that are just done better with a more quality tool. So I'm going to let you hear the difference between the Milwaukee and the Ryobi. It's quite a massive difference. So, all right, I'm going to finish getting all of these lug nuts off. Okay, so now there are two bolts we need to remove. They're 10 millimeter. In order for us to get the caliper off of the truck. So I'm using an electric ratchet again from Milwaukee because I really love these tools. This is probably the best tool I own, honestly. And I removed the top bolt, and there's another bolt just like it on the bottom that we'll show you here. So there it is. We're going to do the exact same thing. Attach 10 millimeter socket to the bolt and extract it out. If you just have a regular ratchet, that's probably your best tool as compared to a wrench here. With both of these bolts out, the caliper is now completely removed from the truck. Take a flathead screwdriver. There's a pin on top of the caliper, or top of the brake pad you need to push in, and then simply pry the brake pad out. At this point, it's safe for you to take the caliper and just rest it right on top of the axle of the truck, and it'll just sit there. Now, we did not use the emergency brake in this brake change. And the reason is because if I wanted to check the parking brake while I'm in here, I need to remove the rotor. If I'd had the emergency brake on, I would not be able to. These pads, both top and bottom, look like they're okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put the rotor back on. But remember, don't push the emergency brake on. If that rotor feels like it's absolutely stuck, it won't come off. It's probably because the emergency brake's on. It should literally just kind of fall off the truck when you grab it. So now we need to go on to removing these pads. The first pad has some clips that hold it in. So I'm just going to take a flathead screwdriver on these old pads and just simply pry them away from the caliper, and it should just come loose, fall out of the caliper once that's done. All right, the second one, you need to have a good C-clamp. There are other tools for doing this. I have always used a C-clamp. It works very well. With the old pad still in place, I go to compress the caliper in. So we are literally pushing the fluid back through the system. This is why we loosened the reservoir in the beginning. And I am simply pressing that caliper back in. Don't take this pad out until you've done this. It makes it a lot simpler with that pad in place. So now that the caliper is completely compressed, I'm going to take a flathead screwdriver and pry this pad away from the caliper. It's held in a little differently than the other side that you saw. This one has 3 prongs that sort of stick out in a crown, and it holds it into the caliper. And there's a hole inside the caliper that those springs go into. All right, so now it's time for us to reverse the process, put new pads back in. So the first one we're going to do is the one we just took out with the 3 prongs on it. This is a little bit difficult to get in, I'm just warning you. So give it a shot, see if you can get it to go in without you having to modify the pad at all, but I am unable to do this on either side of the truck. So my recommendation to you is to get a large pair of pliers and see if you can't just very slightly compress the springs on the pads. You don't want to do this too much because this needs to be a tight fit, and without compressing the springs, you won't be able to get it in at all. At least I couldn't. So this large pair of pliers helps me just barely. I'm really not pressing this very hard at all. I'm just, just microns of an inch here, if that's even a measurement. And then snap them back in. It goes in a lot easier here. Then once the back pad is on, we can move on to the front pad. These are specific to the side of the truck that you're working on. So match them up against the pad, the old pad that you have. Make sure that you're using the correct pad for the correct side. So this is the old pad. You can see it has what's called a squealer on it right here. And the squealer rubs against the rotor to create that noise. Do you hear that? That is what the designers put into the pad to let you know it's time to change your brakes. It's a little piece of tin that is scratching against the rotor, and it's doing its job by making an audible tone that tells you change your brakes. If you don't, steel goes against steel, and it's not pleasant. There's a lot more work to do at that point. You definitely would need new rotors. All right, so now we're going to put the outer pad in place as well. Remember those little dimples that the old pad was held into? You'll see them on yours. You'll see where the previous pad was. Very easy to just snap it right into place, and you'll be able to move the pad, just snap it down, and then you'll be able to put this back onto the rotor. Little trick here I did was I pulled the caliper on top of the leaf spring. Just makes it easier to work on, so don't forget to put it back under. It probably won't fit well if you don't. All right, so these little pins push out. This is where the bolts go in, and these things move in and out, and you can see them moving here. They are going to need to be pushed out as you push the caliper back onto the holder. You'll notice they'll start hitting on the back side, and they will not. The caliper won't go into place. The new pads have a little clip, and you can see it here. That clip has to go down onto this bottom shim. We're going to replace the shims that came because we have new ones that came with the kit. So these are very simple, very little tiny pieces of metal. Just take a flathead screwdriver and a hammer and just tap them right off. They will release from the caliper holder. And then we take the new ones that came with the kit. On this particular truck, the shims sort of fold in so as they attach. So it kind of goes from one side to the other, and it just sort of snaps on. So get it attached on one side, and then take a hammer and simply tap it on the rest of the way. So start at the front here, which you have access to. Line it up, and just simply tap it on. So you'll find it when you go to do the back side that the rotor gets in the way. So it's going to be a lot easier here to do the back side if you just remove the rotor. So okay, so now you have full access. You can knock it on the rest of the way. Same thing applies for the bottom. It simply just folds into place. So once the top's in place, snap the bottom one in the exact same way. Now both of the shims are in place. Now the caliper can finally go back onto the truck. So here we put the rotor back on. Car stops better when it has a rotor. And now we put the caliper back onto the truck. That clip that's on the top brake pad, push it down just a little bit, and it'll slide underneath the caliper a little bit easier. Once you've sort of got it, part of the way on, I take a hammer and I always just tap on it just a little bit, and it makes everything just sort of snap into place. Okay, all we gotta do is put the bolts back in to the calipers to tighten them back onto the bracket, the caliper holder bracket. So always use a little bit of Loctite here, never a bad idea. I have seen calipers come loose while the car is in operation. The result is not good. So I always add a little bit of Loctite when I'm messing with brake calipers or brake caliper brackets, just to make sure that they stay after I've tightened them up. I would just recommend that when you go to tighten these back in, definitely want to get them nice and snug. Okay, that's pretty much it. Lastly, go back, tighten the reservoir back down, and you're done. So thank you guys very much for watching. I really hope this video helped you. If it did, you can help me by subscribing. It really does make a difference. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.